So I'm talking about predators and trapping along the Ashley Rakahuri River, the work of the Ashley Rakahuri Rivercare group. So the group was set up in 1999 basically to look after this set of birds along the river. And of particular concern is the black-fronted tern. And I've got a few slides dedicated to which can be compared with what is happening in the other rivers, what the work that wildlife management is doing. Even at this scale, you can see why we focus our activities. One of the main reasons we focus our activities along the 21 kilometres from our Kuku Junction to State Highway 1. It's the best bit of Braided River. We do have traps around the Ashley estuary, but I don't have time to talk about them. The orange dots are black-fronted tern colonies from last season, a lot more than usual along our part of the river. And with the limited work we did higher up, we found 4. And it's actually entirely possible that there could be as many black-fronted tern fledglings produced from further up the river than there is from down here. I don't think that would be the case with the other bird species, though. So we've got trapping records going back to 2004, and it started off until about 2015. There weren't that many traps. There's an average of 50 per season, and only out there in the nesting season. And something like around this general area, probably a little bit more widespread than that. So DOC 200 and modified Tim's traps mainly for cats. So that's what we've built up to now. We've got 238, well, it varies a bit, permanent traps along the river, 100-metre spacings, 179 DOC, 55 Tim's. On both sides of the river, either side of the best nesting habitat. For several years, we've had a certain amount of trapping out on the fairway during the nesting season, and that's been building up a bit more recently. So last season, there was traps at 101 trap locations, not there all the time, but sort of being moved as necessary around black-fronted tern colonies and some individual nests. Mainly these run through DOC 150s, but we've had to try other traps, but I'll show you why a bit later. A few more details. We've got about 17 volunteers with around a dozen traps each. The idea is to check them fortnightly. Sometimes it gets a bit longer than that. And we like to feed our predators well and vary it a bit, not give them the same thing all the time. I think that's probably a better tactic than just the same couple of things all the time. For about 3.5 years, we've been using this database to work with our data. So you enter your trap data, your trapping data, push a button, and you get summary tables and charts as shown in this presentation. Those are all the individual trapping lines. Looking at the data time-wise, but before you do that, you've got to realise that trapping along a braided river is a bit different to trapping in a bush. Things are changing quite a lot. The numbers of traps change due to things like fires and flood. The red traps are actually traps which are out in the fairway in the nesting season, but not out there afterwards. And you can see we went from having almost equal numbers of Tims and DOC to I think that's my phone. I thought I turned it off. It's being dealt with. To a lot more DOC traps than Tim's traps. And where they are changes. We used to have most of our traps close to the river in gorse and broom, etc. And now most of them are in trees to get away from those floods. So you've got to take that into account when you look at all the data. So it has an influence. This is our trapping, some of our trapping data over the years, and 3 main things to look at. The first is increase in catch over time is mainly due to year-round trapping from 2015 and a lot more traps, especially from 2017. But there is an influence on the sort of traps and where they are, especially in things like the ship rat numbers. Hedgehogs were overwhelmingly the dominant catch, sort of like 80% or so until mid-2013. And then percentage-wise, they really dropped off. And rats appeared in numbers only after mid-2016. Before that, there might only be one rat per year. And we only started distinguishing the species in mid-2019, so the pinks of Norway, oranges shift. And you can explain this a little bit by the sort of traps we've got and where they are, but certainly not completely. There really has been a rat boom in recent years. If you look at the catch rate, catch per 100 trap nights over time, it initially looks really good. It looks like a decrease. If you dig into it a little bit more, the yellow line is the hedgehog catch per 100 trap nights. The blue is the sum of everything else. So that big drop in catch per 100 trap nights has solely been due to hedgehogs. And I really can't see that that could have been due to our trapping. We've got a broad area of berm, all sorts of habitat. We've got hedgehog habitat right in the middle of Rangiora where they get run over by cars. So really that decline can't be due to our trapping. Another thing we did, well, one of our blokes last year did a bit of a study with 3 traps of different types, 3 different locations with trail cameras, and found that we weren't catching much of what was wandering by, and only 8.3% of all visitors resulted in a catch, and feral cats was particularly bad. So again, it's difficult to see that we're having any influence on the predators. There's a strong seasonality to our catch. The top graph here is month by month since early 2019. Second one is average catch per month, and you can see, yeah, it just goes up and down with the seasons. And the bulk of the catch is from January to June. And the main drivers of that are firstly hedgehogs, which hibernate in the winter, and that they really come out to eat in January. Norway rats, not many in winter, and I don't know why, but I know one of the reasons why we're catching more in the summer is that we've got our traps out around colonies and individual nests, so we're catching more then. Cats, for some reason, go into our traps more often from March to July. So this is all very interesting, but I don't know if it really gets us anywhere. Much better off looking at the spatial data. First, you've got to see where the birds nest, and over the last 3 nesting seasons, most species overwhelmingly nested on islands, with the sole exception being the banded dotterel, who they seem to spread out around the whole fairway a lot more and actually be a lot more vulnerable because of it. Each trap in the database is coded for a location, whether it's a berm, the fairway edge, an island, or heavily vegetated island. And this is a graph of catch per 100 trap nights by location for each species. Obviously, the one to look at is the island. That's where all the birds are nesting. And the last 3 seasons, we've only caught 3 species there, the hedgehogs, and the hedgehogs are only on the islands when the flow dries up around them and they can get out there. It seems that stoats, we don't have massive numbers of stoats, and it appears that they mainly just come out to the islands when there's a black-billed gull colony there, and not many of them. But this is where our catch rate of Norway rats is much, much higher than anywhere else. This is not showing the importance of cats. There's cats out there which you can see in trail cameras, and they're just not going into traps. So the ship rats on the berm, that they're not out on the fairway at all. Well, unless it's a vegetated island, a heavily vegetated island out in, well, they're not even there, actually. Weasels are also really not a threat. It's the Norway rats which is the real problem. So this is a plot of catch of Norway rats per trap over the last 3.5 years. And there's a lot more Norway rats caught along the southern edge, although there are some people with a bit of a problem in their species identification. But I think this is really true. There's more rats on the south side, and lots of rats caught in these colony and individual nest traps out in the middle of the river. We don't know nearly enough about Norway rats on braided rivers, to my knowledge, and we need to know more to be able to try and get rid of them. There's another thing out of the database. Each trap is coded for the cover it's under: driftwood, lupin, scrub, single tree or trees. And the rats are overwhelmingly caught out in the fairway under driftwood and some under weed. So there's not a massive amount of data behind this, so you have to be a bit careful. But you sort of wonder, if we didn't have that cover out on these islands, would the Norway rats actually be there? The hedgehogs seem to be more under weed rather than under willow logs and things like that. Ship rats, as you'd expect, are overwhelmingly caught under trees, and weasels are under all cover in the berm. Caught one weasel out on the fairway, not on an island. I'll have a look at specifically at what happens around black-fronted tern colonies. This is one of our nesting colonies from last year, the Groin 3 black-fronted tern colony. There was 19 nests, the orange ones, and a rival either side. Trail cameras there, not all there at the same time. I think there was 5 or 6 cameras and moved around a little bit, but enough to get a pretty good idea of what was going on. Traps, again, there's traps sort of right in the colony, mainly run-through traps, some rat, some fen traps. And they were being shifted a little bit to some extent as well as required, and there's traps either side along the berm. Catch from those traps was only Norway rats, and only 4 of them. No other land predators seen in trail camera images or caught in the traps. This is the outcome from there. No black-fronted tern eggs from those 19 nests hatched. The red stars are where I either saw rats, Norway rats predating eggs, or interpreted it. Yellow ones abandoned, I think, because of rat disturbance, and one nest that I know of, eggs taken by a harrier. So what it looked like to me, the rats were progressing through the colony like this, and actually the last nests made were up in here, and they probably came from the berm down in here. I think they weren't there when the colony started. They turned up about 2 weeks after the colony was discovered. So it really seems that colony nests on islands are much more at risk from rats than individual nests. These rats are probably smelling the birds out there and going out to them. And I think we caught 4 rats in here, and I reckon that you only need half a dozen to clean up the whole colony. And elsewhere, it doesn't actually seem that there's large numbers present either. But in 2019, we had a 48 nest tern colony completely taken out by rats. Well, that's the interpretation only, and what I've seen from more trail cameras and things last season, I'm sure it's correct. So I don't know, could have been 25 or 30 out there. This is from another colony a couple of kilometres further downstream, almost exactly the same size and almost exactly the same outcome. This is what you see at night: rat coming to a black-fronted tern nest, carrying the egg away to eat it, coming back and getting the other one. And that happened over and over again. I only saw one example of this. This is a couple of nice little chicks, a couple of days old. A rat came in the middle of the night, took the first chick, took it away over there somewhere. 15 minutes later, came back and got the second one. And this is not nice to see. I was shouting so much when I saw this that my throat was sore for about 3 days. This is from that same colony as these two. At each of these colonies, I had a trail camera on a trap. I've got nearly 3,000 photos of this sort of thing. A rat, or probably multiple rats, extremely interested in our bait, but not going into the trap. And I wouldn't too. It looks like a guillotine hanging over your head. So I got very angry, and I put 3 more traps around. These fen traps and nice tunnels under the logs. That didn't work. You could see the rats coming and looking at the traps and not going in. So after all the birds had left, I caught a rat in that trap. So I tried all sorts of different baits, didn't work. They were just extremely trap shy. So we need to somehow make traps or use something else which they're not going to be so intimidated by. Another couple examples of black-fronted tern colonies a few kilometres further downstream, with some stilt nests and a wrybill here and a couple of wrybill nests here. These were at fairly different times. Trail cameras, the same as before, not all there at the same time. Traps, was no rats seen in trail cameras or caught in traps here at all. About 5 rats caught in the traps here. Nothing else seen on trail camera images. So the rats are not everywhere, and sometimes they go in traps. So outcomes from this, initially it was good. The green circles are showing nests which hatched. Over in this colony, most of them hatched. 5 were abandoned, and it was really late in the season and things were very hot. They were 42 degrees that the trail camera was saying at some times. And I thought the outcome would be worse than this. I'd seen somewhere else dead chicks by a nest, very hot conditions, but they did hatch. Over here, most hatched, but we had a flood come along on the 16th of December, which covered up most of this area. Only the stippled area was left. And it took the chicks away from here, and some of them may have ended up down here, but there was no fledglings seen around here. One of the nests which hadn't hatched by the time of the flood, the harrier got it. So this sort of thing. And they're actually very fierce, and they can chase the harriers away, but this time it didn't work. So from what I've seen, harriers don't appear to be a major problem, except sometimes at fledgling, when the black-billed gull fledgling chicks have got to fledgling stage, and then they can take a lot of those. And black-backed gulls, for some reason, are just simply not a problem on the Ashley. This was on that eastern colony, a cat coming out to a black-fronted tern nest in the middle of the night. The tern escaped, and usually when I've seen an animal approaching a nest, the tern gets away, and you don't even see it get away. It's just gone so quickly. So the cat sniffed the eggs but didn't take them, and these eggs actually hatched. But that, unfortunately, that's not the end of the story. This is different drone imagery than that before, and you can see along the south side of this island here, flow had pretty much dried up. That cat was at that nest, I think, been able to get out there. Although cats, I have seen cats out on islands when there has been some reasonably significant flow around them. So what happened here, that wrybill hatched a couple of chicks, brought them over here, lost them. This wrybill hatched a couple of chicks, brought them over here, lost them. Went back to exactly the same nest, hatched 2 more chicks, brought them over here and lost them. The chicks from these hatched nest here, I saw them in here, I saw them some over here, and the last 2 I saw over here, and then they were gone. And a bit later, a flood came along and covered up the whole area. So I totally can't prove it, but I think cats probably got all these chicks in this area. So conditions here are very similar now to what they were in January, and there's a gravel extractor who, well, we seem to have convinced to, certainly with ECAN's help, to make a bit of a channel along here and try and keep this high island here as a nesting habitat for next season. The total effect of predation on these birds. This is a sort of timeline of all the black-fronted tern colonies we had on our part of the river. And I can't prove it at all, but I wonder if we actually had 52 nesting pairs approximately. They got almost totally taken out by rats from these 3 colonies, moved to here. mainly got taken out by flooding and rats. These blue things are 2 flooding events. And the third time, they got mainly taken out by abandonment, chick predation, rats, and flood. And from 107 nests, I counted 13 fledglings. This isn't going to be 100% accurate, but it's not going to be that terribly far off. So I wonder how many of those fledglings actually survived. And if these nests hadn't been taken by rats, we might have actually had a pretty good season. This is mainly mixed data in the orange here. It's black-fronted tern productivity over the years. It's been up and down, but you'd have to say it's down. The overall trend is down. And in the last 3 seasons, this real low productivity has been mainly due to Norway rats. Other species are doing better. The roebull are doing quite well. We don't know about banded dotterel. The blue bars on this are our from our Braided River bird counts each year since 2001 or 2000. And it used to be that excludes black-billed gull, which would overwhelm everything. It used to be that our numbers closely paralleled the amount of bare gravel. When you get a real weed infestation, bird numbers drop off. And I actually believe this correlation. It just makes so much sense. But since 2017, we've had plenty of bare gravel and our numbers are actually dropping. There's been these 2 highly anomalous counts, which are very clearly correlate with floods in the Rakahuri, and the birds came over from there. But overall, the trend is down. Now, the only local factor I can see in this is the rat boom. I don't really believe this. I don't know if it's a valid correlation, but it's just the only thing I can see, a local factor which could be doing this. There probably very likely are others. So in summary, we need to understand a lot more about Norway rats, and so that we can try to deal with them, because they're an absolute massive threat on the Ashley River. We also need to put more attention into cats, because they, I think, are pretty bad too. You really wonder how much of a predation problem we had prior to the rat invasion. If the birds always nesting on the islands, the only things that really get there and cause the damage nowadays are the rats. We need to focus more on banded dotterels that don't necessarily nest on islands, are more vulnerable to the other predators. Annual survey results, you've got to be fairly careful on how you interpret them, I think. And we may need to make sure that the braided rivers retain their braiding, so other predators aren't more of a threat. So gravel extraction is potentially a really big threat, and constriction of the rivers, which destroys the braided nature, are a real problem. And Wildlands did a report commissioned by ECAN a while ago, and made quite a few recommendations involving a lot of more traps and probably poisoning for rats, but we haven't as yet got around to deciding what is actually going to happen. But the Rivercare group is really reaching the limits of our resources, and there would have to be a lot of professional help in this.